Good evening, everybody. I, architect Sneha Taishite, on behalf of the Indian Institute of Architecture and Research, welcome all the participants, team members, and speakers. The Institute of Environmental Architecture and Research is a Mumbai-based educational research and training institute with a vision to create a sustainable environment through scientific research, education and training, socio-cultural understanding, community engagement, and awareness. We are a multidisciplinary group of scientists, professionals, and academicians who've joined forces to form this organization, having worked collaboratively for more than 15 years on education, environmental consultancy, and awareness. Our mission is Environment First. I'm happy to announce that this is our eighth webinar in the series, which we have started during the lockdown period. So far, we have reached around 1,200 participants altogether. Our main objective in this webinar series is to provide educational and research inputs and a scientific and analytical approach to environmental issues. Today, we will be having a webinar on Auroville, its inner and outer sustainability. I would now welcome our moderator, President of IER, Dr. Roshni Udyawar Yehuda, to introduce our today's speaker. Thank you.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this webinar on Auroville Inner and Outer Sustainability. Auroville is a mystery. To many, there are questions. Is it a forest? Is it an international village? Is it a spiritual center? Is it part of India? Is it a research hub for sustainability? And many more questions. And in many ways, Auroville is perhaps a little of all of this. Our tryst with Auroville began way back in 2004, 2005, when the first batch of environmental architecture students landed in Auroville and experienced for the first time the thrill of living and experiencing an experimental town. Houses made of mud and ferrocrete and wattle and daub, a central eating place that cooked local food from steam generated from a large solar dish of mirrors, afforestation on a really massive scale, watershed management, decentralized wastewater treatment systems that required no energy, experiments in organic farming and seed conservation, music, tai chi, and all art, creative art forms, experiments in sustainable livelihoods, even an economic and a governance system all of its own. And of course, the magical attraction of the Matri Mandir, as that was envisioned by the mother and designed by, conceived by architect Roger Anger. It was impossible not to visit this place again. And subsequently, batch after batch of our students of master's program in environmental architecture learned sustainability as a first lesson from a week-long course called Sustainable Habitats at the Center for Scientific Research in Auroville. Their bounding experiences were not just of technologies and structures, but of people who had inherently and voluntarily adopted ecological values and who walked the path of sustainability. I have to tell you that this course that we collaborated with CSR for almost 15 years transformed the lives of many and brought an inherent change in their thinking, not just in what they learned, but in what they experienced during their stay in Auroville. And today we have with us none other than Tensi Batens, a persona whom we identify with Auroville, the founder director of Center for Scientific Research, CSR Auroville. He has been part of Auroville ever since the envisioning of the dream of the mother beckoned young men and women from around the world to take charge of this mission of human unity. Tensi came from Belgium and has been living in Auroville since mid-70s. He was involved in afforestation and renewable energy projects in the early years and later co-founded the Auroville Center for Scientific Research in 1984 and the Auroville Building Center in 1989. He is also currently involved in several projects related to appropriate building technologies, renewable energy, and sanitation. He also conducts workshops and training courses for professionals and voluntary organizations to promote integral choices for sustainable future. Friends, I'm very honored to present to you Tensi Batens.
Thank you, Roshni. Honored after so many years to get back in contact with you and your students and your partners and colleagues and things like that. Shall we start with a small introduction? Indeed, you have emphasized the outer aspect of Auroville, but what is actually driving is the inner aspect, and that's not so obvious. It's a little bit veiled, but it's there. It's very much there, and I hope to explain a little bit about that when we move through the presentation and when we have a chance to speak about that aspect also, which is so essential to Auroville and which makes it a little bit different from all the other experiments that are taking place. Shall we go over to the PowerPoint? Would that be okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Indeed, I came in contact with Auroville. Is it okay? Yeah.
Yes.
I came in contact with Auroville in 1968, somewhere during August, as a very young student. And afterwards, I traveled overland to India in 71, stayed in India in 72, and came back to finish my studies. That visit to India made an impact on my whole life, and I decided actually later on that instead of staying and pursuing a very comfortable career, I moved out to Auroville, to India, and became part of what was called Auroville. When I first heard the name of Auroville, I was much more attracted, not so much by the reasons why and the why, especially the why behind, but by the adventure of building a new city. Something which had to start completely from scratch. So there was that ceremony on 28 February 1968. We have the exact starting date of Auroville, 10:30. So we could actually draw a very correct horoscope. We came, just to situate, we're in the south of India, Tamil Nadu, on the Bay of Bengal. We have two major landmarks. In the south, we have Pondicherry, the city, about 12 lakh people. And in the north, we have that huge tank, Kaliveli tank. The first effort from the people who joined Auroville was, of course, an environmental rehabilitation. We came from this place, an emptiness, no trees, not really a desert, but absolutely degraded landscape, not much shelter. And then there was a turning point in the 70s when the idea came of doing a small intervention, which was actually making bunds, stopping the rainwater and catching it actually in small little trenches from which the earth was taken and making a bund. This intervention actually helped a rainwater program, which in the future helped us to establish about between 3.5 million trees. That program is still continuing. The next thing after the environmental rehabilitation effort was trying to secure a sustainable water resource management. We had a degraded landscape with several canyons, about 5 canyons crisscross or plateau, and it was man-made because the surrounding trees, which were protecting and making sure that the rain infiltrated within the soil, disappeared and cut out huge chunks of soil and earth and made canyons. Some of the biggest ones, the large ones, are 35-meter deep. We have a view. The unfortunate thing about this one is that the water, the rainwater, fell on the higher places, moved down towards the lower side, made canyons, and disappeared in the background to the Bay of Bengal, lost forever. The culprit is actually the rain, but we need water, as we will see later on. This resulted, observations to this effect resulted in massive bun making and terracing and trying to control the water and make it stay in the place where it fell. We dammed. We had several dams on the main canyons. I go back, sorry. Where do I go back? Just a sec. Yeah, we had several canyons which we made in order to at least keep the water in place and give it the time to infiltrate back into the soil and into the aquifers. This program is still continuing. The third effort was trying to integrate sustainable technologies. You have to envision a landscape with absolutely no infrastructure, no electricity, no water supply, no sewage pipelines, no telephone lines, nothing, no roads. So everything had to be done and restarted and reinvented, actually. So integrating sustainable technologies was actually an effort that came normal. We speak about this one a little bit later. I go and we give a little bit of an overview of what Auroville has been trying to develop, maybe achieve over the many years. You have an overview of the actual plan of Auroville. You have the center where we come back later, and then you have these lines which give 4 zones which are there, and we speak of them very briefly about the zones. Let's go to the center where Roshni mentioned you have Matrimandir, a small overview of the phases, which we started in 72. It looks like this at the moment. It's finished except for the gardens. We come and explain a little bit about the residential zone here. This one, you have several buildings there, among them the solar kitchen. What strikes in the residential zone is a variety of buildings. Also an effort for reaching a certain perfection and beauty. But you have from very simple households to very modern houses, I would say concrete on the bottom and kind of a steel structure like a container on the top. You have even wattle and dope houses. You have everything that is available and that is possible to do within our climatic zone is being tried out and experimented on. It's interesting to see that we came from this assembly of huts. I used to live in one of these in the beginning, in 72. And we have come in the 52 years of our existence, we have, of course, developed a certain infrastructure, among them exhibition rooms, an auditorium, recreation for children, swimming pools, kitchen, restaurants, and a town hall. We go a step further and we go to the zone of the cultural educational zone, and there the effort is, or the key word of that one is a youth that never ages. It's very nice to walk around and to visit the schools in Auroville because they reflect also a different variety, architectural variety, but they all actually try to give an atmosphere of beauty for the students. Not a drab school building, but something that attracts a student to come back every day and to take the classes. It's quite a beautiful environment for the students, and the educational budget is one of the largest within Auroville. You have all kinds of programs from pre-crash up till 18 years, where you have plenty of programs. Creativity is very much emphasized. You have theater, cultural events, you have exhibition rooms, and quite a unicum, I think, not a unicum, but quite a special feature is every student subscribing to the schools in Auroville has a compulsory thing to go for sports in the afternoon. From 3 to 5:30, every student has a sports afternoon, every day, 5 days a week. There is also a part which is dedicated to handicraft in that zone. We go one step further and we come to the international zone, where the key is a living embodiment of an actual human unity. It's the most difficult zone, and it's the one where a lot of groundwork has to happen, but a real clear direction has still to happen. We have some guiding principles how to develop it, but it's not yet taken off. What you have there, one of the first pavilions was Bharat-Nivas, the Indian pavilion. You have also, it's the place of the visitor center, and you have the start of the American pavilion. And the idea is to develop a pavilion. I'm very sorry. Sorry for this one. The idea is to have pavilions from where most of the countries would be represented. The idea is there, but how to work it out is still debated. We come to the last zone, the top zone, the northern zone, and it is the only zone which has a name, Oroshilpa. Shilpa means, of course, the skills. And there we have an emphasis, and keywords are research, experiment, technology, skills. It's also the place where CSR is located. And that's the opportunity to speak a little bit in that zone about the work that CSR has been doing for the last 35 years. We have a section which is concentrated on design, and under that one we have several architectural offices. We have also an emphasis on building technologies. About ferrocement is one of them, earth is another one. We've done quite a few buildings using ferrocement technology, which we started actually in the 70s, in the late 70s, and which we have come to master quite well. And at a certain point, we were giving training to all the building centers of India under the guidance of HUDCO at that time. You have the Tibetan pavilion. When it's finished, the buttresses are in ferrocement. The workshed, which takes shape completely, it's a 13 or 15 meter long shed, 7 meter wide, and then 7.5 meter high. You see the sequence of this one in its finished form. We also enjoyed doing sculptures with ferrocement, all kind of beautiful shapes. And then, of course, one of the areas in which we concentrated for many years, several decades, was energy, in which we got involved in biomass, biofuel, wind, solar PV, solar thermal, pedal powers, vehicles and motors. It started with the effort of pumping water from the underground. And instead of using a pump, we very quickly went over to using a Cretan wind pump, which was done in wood. From there, we moved over to a metal structure. Not only wind pumps, but also wind generators we tried out. Some of them are continued. This is also still manufactured. We got involved, of course, in biogas plants. And instead of doing them in a traditional way, we used the technology of ferrocement. We made everything in modules which could fit together. And for many years, more than 10 years, we were the sole suppliers of biogas plants for the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. You see, they went in crates on a ship and a sea voyage of 3 days and unloaded there. The biggest program and development took place actually in the renewable sector of solar power panels. We never attempted to make solar panels. We collaborated with the major solar agencies that were available at that time, but we specialized in solar pumping, and especially what is called the balance of systems, which we developed for tracking and for actually moving the panels towards the sun and everything. This program was done in cooperation with the solar companies and with the government, and we placed more than 2,000 solar pumps within India, the bulk of them in North India, in the belt of Punjab, Rajasthan and Gujarat. We worked in the Kutch area, in the Rann of Kutch, for providing water to the people who does the salt mining. We did quite a difficult project of supplying 8,000 panels in the Ladakh, 8,000 panels and 8,000 solar lamps, which had to be completed in a span of 3 months, because after that one, the roads were difficult. The places where we wanted to supply were difficult to reach. The first solar plant in 93 or in 97, I can't remember, which was at that time rated as one of the bigger ones in India, 37, happened in Auroville for Matrimandir. We took also several devices which were tried out and which were afterwards left on the site because they actually didn't perform. And one of them was actually solar street lighting. We improved on it. We placed, instead of putting the batteries at the bottom, we placed them on the top. It's a bit more difficult because it's much hotter there, but we managed to shield and have the battery functioning here. Instead of normal lamps, we went to first to power saving lamps and afterwards to LED lamps and things like that. So we're still using them. It's very practical for areas which don't have access to electrical connections in rural areas. We got involved in solar water heating and did our experiments to try to improve it. And then in the 70s, at the end of the 70s, we made the first attempt of having a solar bowl. This was made out of recycled parts, mostly cycle parts. It tracks the sun. A bowl has not a point, but a line of concentration. So during the day, the receiver moves from the highest in the morning to the afternoon going here. We decided that it was worthwhile, that experiment, to duplicate in a bigger scale. And we integrated a solar bowl of about 15-meter dia, I think, in the solar kitchen, which is a building completely implemented with alternative energies, ferrocement and stabilized mud bricks. We made specially designed ferrocement roof channels, actually, to make the circle here, the bowl, and then it was pasted by hand about, I can't remember how many, but I think there must have been 8,000 mirrors of a certain side, all pointed out to one direction. The work was done at night because you could not do it at daytime. It works, it still works. It's one of the renewable devices, which is the cheapest to build. The whole project was less than 20 lakhs, I can't remember, 25 lakhs. The disadvantage, of course, the advantage is that if the receiver here, that arm with a long tube, where the heat reaches more than 2000 Celsius, this is a fantastic source of energy. The disadvantage is, of course, whenever a cloud comes over, the system stops. So you need a backup system, which makes the whole device quite complicated to integrate. We did that for the kitchen. We integrated a boiler, but it's not simple. You have a view here where it's working, and the kitchen. We spent also on very ordinary devices like mirror reflectors. And we found out by just experimenting that if you take a double mirror, you have the first rays coming in the primary mirror setup, and you reflect it to a second set of mirrors, and then reflect it back to another focal point, you actually double the energy in this point. We tried to integrate an energy device, a pump for this application, but we never managed. That was a step beyond us, so it's not used, it's there, and we hope in the future that somebody comes along and has the knowledge to help us to realize that potential device, which is very simple to construct and to operate. The last addition of activities to CSR, we had designed with ferrocement, earth, we had renewable energy devices, we added water, and then mobility came also. We are very concerned about having an alternative to cars. And since more than a decade, we have experimented with vehicles, operated vehicles. That led to a whole project taking place where we have about 200 battery operated cycles, which are kind of given to the Aurovillians to be used, and they pay a certain amount for a month, and the cycle is completely maintained by a monthly servicing checkup and things like that. We hope to increase the pool of cycles And we do all kinds of experiments to see that the cycle takes back its place in the mobility sector of Auroville. We go to the last major area where CSR is working, and that is water. In this one, we started quite early, especially with the wastewater, but we got also involved whenever there is a disaster, like a flood or a tsunami or whatever, in emergency sanitation. The last edition was trying to come up with a water resource management program. The energy sanitation gave us a very interesting opportunity to actually increase our skill in the prefabrication of elements. And we took the toilets, the movable toilets, to a height which it was possible to construct in one place and then install in a couple of days in a village which needed a sanitation facility, and for men and for women, with supply of water, and in certain cases also a supply of a treatment plant. We branched out quite early at the end of in the beginning of the 80s to natural wastewater treatment systems. And that has taken, and it's still going on today. And it was a long journey of starting from imported ideas from the West and developing slowly over many years our own technology applicable for our climatic conditions. We started very simple. We had a household and directed the sewage to a small lagoon, which came here, and then trying to recycle and made the water which came out of a septic tank to make it usable again. All these early experiments actually failed because we didn't get the right sequence of components. And that came much later with the help from several resource persons, several organizations who helped us to develop that system into a mature technology. This is an example of trying and succeeding ultimately of using the kitchen water and recycling it so that it becomes usable as a recycled wastewater. We did several experiments on difficult types of wastewater. This was an experiment on toxic wastewater, which came out of a handicraft unit which used dyeing products, which are obviously toxic. And we used a technology which was called algae turf scrubbing. We planted, we cultivated algae, and the algae through a system absorbed or neutralized the toxic components in the wastewater. We managed quite well. The drawback on such systems is that they need a lot of maintenance and a monitoring, which after a while, of course, went down, and then the system which needs quite a bit of attention didn't work anymore. So these were all experiments until we slowly and over many years managed to find the different components, what it needs to actually treat water properly. There are about 3 components here, and then a planted filter, and then a series of open ponds. All the experiments took place within the vicinity of habitats, near habitats. They all had a common factor of trying to integrate aesthetically the wastewater treatment system in a beautiful manner, so that it was not an eyesore, but something to value. Most of the time we managed. There were times that obviously we did not manage. We exported the system when we were confident enough to outside. We did a lot of work in the north of Gujarat, in Kutch region, where we had the opportunity to do a special plant for municipal waste, which is still working. We worked in Nepal for a company. And then the time came when we put in question actually the imported device, which came from a temperate climate, which is called a planted filter. We had inquiries for implementation of the technology in an urban landscape. And when the requirements for the planted filter was set, which is about 400 square meters for 120 people, the equivalent of 100 people, most of the promoters hooked off because it was not doable to sacrifice such a huge space for treating wastewater for an apartment site or a campus or something like that. Was not doable. And that was when actually in the 80s we started looking for another device, this one. If you have a campus where you have enough space, this is not an issue. But we found that there were other problems with the planted filter, which is a device imported from a temperate climate. It works very well in a temperate and in a colder climate. It does have serious hiccups in a tropical climate, where the clogging takes place after a few years, and then it becomes very cumbersome to do the maintenance and the cleaning of the filter material and things like that. So we evolved from a planted filter here with lots of space requirements to actually a device which existed, but which we innovated on within the Auroville context. It's called a vortex. The vortex is a natural phenomenon. You have it in the typhoon. The typhoon is actually a vortex. It comes on the water, goes over the land, and provides a huge amount of energy. Unfortunately, it's destructive. We looked at it. We had several examples, and the vortex happens in every household. If you fill your sink with water to do the dishes and you pull out the plug, it actually produces you a small vortex when the water disappears in the bottom of the sink. And that's the idea that was reproduced in a tube with the aid of a small motor. We channel the wastewater or the water on the bottom, and then we produce a kind of a vortex. We knew that it worked to enhance fresh water, and we tried it out for wastewater, and we were really very pleased to see that it produced, the first thing that it produced was actually it neutralized the smell in the wastewater. So there came a long period of nearly 3 years when we only focused on trying to find out what was the best way to integrate a vortex system into a wastewater treatment plant. The advantage of this one is that it supports a natural self-purification process in the water. It's a continuous spiral movement whereby the oxygen uptake in the water is released, and it has a direct impact on the dissolved oxygen. because it increases the oxygen in the water, you have a reduction of the chemical oxygen demand, you have a decrease of the biological oxygen demand. There is even a reduction of calgal, nitrogen, and coliforms. So we made at the end of a 3-year research and development project, we were sure that we could replace the planted filter with a Vortex system. And then came a long period, several years, of testing out whether it worked under different circumstances. We managed that first within Auroville, and we're thankful that the community is open to experiments where we can actually introduce new devices, benchmark them, test them, develop them, take out the teething problems and everything. So that was something that continued. And then came the request from clients, bigger clients. We did, the biggest one that we did was in Bangalore for VBHS HC, a 750 KLD. The latest one was a couple of years ago, a completely prefabricated system of 60 KLD in Auroville for the residential zone, which looks like that, and which supplies 8 communities with the treated water. I'm quite proud to say that the treated water, which comes out here, and no, I'm sorry, here, this is the last phase, it comes out here. Here is the end of the sewage line. You have, it comes into a grid chamber, it goes like this. You have a settler, then you have a balancing tank, you have the baffle tank, you have the anaerobic filter, you have the 2 vortexes, and then you have the storage space. From here, there is a return pipe which goes and supplies 8 communities with wastewater. The BOD of this one is 8, which is quite remarkable. Having more or less brought, more or less, because there is always scope for improvement, come from a 35-year journey with a few ideas to reuse wastewater and to develop this into a mature technology. I think we have reached that stage now. And we have still a team in CSR who works in implementing several, implementing not only for Auroville, but also for clients outside the community within India. We made the move to another issue, and we all know that on a global scale, water is becoming an increasing problem, and Auroville is not exempted from that problem. We started about 6 years ago to focus exclusively on addressing water security for Auroville through a multi-source modeling. Let me explain a little bit what we mean by that one. The challenging is that we found out through a system of checking that the groundwater alone, the water which we pump, won't be enough to sustain our activities. So we need a much wider source, more other sources to overcome the deficiency of groundwater. And the proposal is to do this through multi-sourcing. It means using several sources, combine them, place them where they are the most efficient, develop them, measure them, do everything necessary, and bring the whole thing through a maturity. In Auroville and in our bioregion, we have rainwater, we have recycled water, we have still groundwater. We have also the future possibility of using desalinated water. This should come with water saving, making the water usage much more efficient. The objectives are at the moment to research and develop a dynamic model for this one in order to integrate all the sources efficiently. And we are in a period of testing and putting all the puzzle pieces together. How does that happen? We obviously, when you do something like that and you speak about a resource, you need to have data. So for that one, we put in place topography, climatic data, hydrogeology, wastewater treatment system. We need to know something about water consumption. We need to know about land use, population, and there are many other subjects which needs to complete in order to fulfill that necessity of coming to an informed data decision. We are part of a bioregion. The watershed here is called Kali Valley watershed. We are about here in the end of the watershed. There are, if I'm not mistaken, more than 300 tanks in this one. And some of the tanks were started, the bigger tanks were started under the Shola era, 1,500 years ago. It's an amazing system where by gravity, the water was captured and flowed, the excess of water during the monsoon flowed automatically in the next, came all together in a huge tank, and then a system is there to have the excess going into the Bay of Bengal. Unfortunately, today the system is not maintained and in disuse, which is a kind of a tragedy. I'm sorry, that was not supposed. We have done quite a bit of research, not research, but gathering of information about what is or underground, what are the aquifers. And we have a fairly accurate idea of what are the different aquifers which are composed and which are giving water to actually Auroville. We have them lined out here. We made a map, a model of these things, and we have for Auroville about 280 wells which are supplying the whole community with water. There is one deep well here, which was an observation well done by the government. That information, if you want to do data collection, you have to have actually a site or a place where you can store the data. We developed for that purpose a GIS interface, and it's a public GIS auroville.org.in. Everybody can access that one, where we have created a database where all this information can be stored and is accessible for stakeholders and for public use. Topography we do with state-of-the-art equipment. For the first time, we managed to do an accurate map for Auroville, which resulted in doing a very accurate point taking of all the features which were missed, Matrimandir, residential area. It gives us contour intervals of 10 centimeters, but it gives us also the possibility to see where the water is going. Especially this is very useful if we want to do rainwater harvesting on a much wider scale. We store the data of we have about 280 wells, but we do a weekly monitoring of about 60 wells. And this data is also stored on the GIS website. You click, you open the page, and you can actually see the weekly either decreasing water table or going up water table. Very interesting feature. We are in the middle of, instead of doing a manual reading of the wells, we tried to do it with a wireless data transmission. It took us quite a time to get everything together, but we managed. We transferred the data by radio wave, which is a receiver which is called LoRaWAN, especially for this kind of data transmission. We have also several rain gauges, but also weather stations. We have commercial weather stations, but we also made our own weather stations. Data is stored on a standard sheet, so we have the daily rainfall, very useful for analyzing and to make predictions. And then rainwater harvesting. The big idea which we are actually trying to implement in an urban landscape. We still have the space, we still have the possibility of starting. And it starts like every little river, which afterwards becomes a big river with a small effort, just making sure that the rainwater is catched somewhere and goes to a defined area where it can be reused. We have drainage channels, which we are experimenting with. We need to have silting pumps where the water is delayed and drops the silt, not the silk, the silt, and then hopefully comes into a tank. This brings us to the last area of the green belt, and it's the outer circle, which we call actually the interface with the bioregion. And it's this one where we actually concentrate on farms. We know that we have to do something about trying to produce as much as possible our own food. We have severe hurdles because we have a very short possibility, a very short window of growing. It's about 3-4 months where we can grow vegetables. We do that and we produce a variety of all kinds of veggies. There are plenty of experiments going on. Hydroponics is part of that, but there are also other ones going on. It's also the area where we try to create an awareness with the surrounding rural communities, the huge necessity to take care of the waste reproduced in your own community. And this is an effort which is ongoing since many decades and which is trying to uphold. We have several units working specifically on that one, wasteless, eco-service and things like that, to do something proper with the waste that we produce. We all produce waste. It's a matter of taking care of it, but not only in your own place, but also in the surrounding place. So that's ongoing. Walking within Auroville, especially early morning or late afternoon when the sunset is taking place, is a pleasure. You come along these almost, I can say, hidden places, which give you such a beautiful feeling. Little things which makes you see and smile within yourself. Wow, how nice. How did they think about it? It brings us actually to, we move from the outer effort to the inner effort. And despite the Earth's and the global community effort to do something with technology and to improve our environment, we are not really making headway. We have huge problem with plastic. We have problems with drugs, overpopulation. We have problems with malnourishment, not enough food. Name it, and there is the positive side of the coin. You have an invention, but the bottom side of the coin gives at the same time a problem, which we don't seem to be making headway about it. So Auroville has received that task of actually combining the individual journey with the outside journey. And we believe, most of us, that unless you do an effort within yourself for self-exploration, for self-improvement, for trying to reach a certain perfection within yourself, if that is not achieved, we will never solve the problems of the Earth. No matter how good the technological inventions are and the sustainable programs that we try to implement, it's not enough. It needs that dynamic of those two elements, an inner effort to improve as humanity as a whole, and an outer taking care of our planet Earth. And it's nicely in these two sentences from Sri Aurobindo, it's nicely captured. Somewhere on Earth, this marvel would like to disclose itself. Auroville is one of them where we try that out. There are other places of the Earth, we're sure about it. Some of us are in contact with them where they have the same effort. And till that is reached, our journeying cannot cease. I think we are nicely at 1 hour. Roshni, you are there?
Yes, that's perfect. Is it?
I don't know whether it's perfect. We
It's,
haven't reached that one.
yeah, I think.
I'm joined by two other members of my community.
Can you
Pavneet
put on your video, Tensi?
And Pavneet and Chaitanya, because I consider myself of the older generation. And the younger generation always complain that we take too much space, too much bandwidth within the community. We always know better. We always think that we have the wisdom. So there is often a friction between, a generational friction between between the different generations. So I would be glad if there are questions that they also answer some of the wisdom, because they are part and parcel from the effort to keep this experiment alive and moving forwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Tensi. Wonderful. We can also see the rest of your team.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah.
I go into the background.
Thank
You
you.
see them? Yeah. Pavneet is an architect. Chaitanya is a master carpenter who specialized in roof building.
Fantastic. I think we almost got lost in that whole, as if it was a virtual trip of Auroville. Thank you for taking us through that whole journey. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions, and there's already a lot of comments about this wonderful and very simplistic presentation that you did about giving us the idea of sustainability and giving us all of the experiments and the failures and everything that you did in Auroville. It's amazing, and it's really an inspiration for a lot of people who are working in this field. And I'm sure that after this lockdown, which has also made us realize how we should, maybe about the inner sustainability that you talked about, that how we should also, probably look at our ways of life. And I hope that people can come and visit Auroville and see what has been done. So while I wait for some of the questions to stream in, I would just like to begin with a little bit of discussion. And I think I would like to ask about, in terms of the vision of Auroville, how it was perceived or how it was envisioned at the time in the beginning, and now, how do you see how do you see it coming? I mean, do you see that the dream has been reached, or there is still a long way to go in terms of a perfect, sustainable town?
There's still a very long way to go. No doubt about it. What is striking within the community, and we had a discussion about it, we have regularly discussion about it, we have to make this effort a harmonious combination of a wider group, and more. If we sit together with a few people, we agree we can work out a system of governance, a system of moving forward. As soon as we have about 3,500 people at the moment, we have 52 nationalities. Imagine a Belgian and a Russian to agree on something. Forget about it. Forget about a Dutch and a Belgian agreeing, and don't even think about a French and a Belgian agreeing. Impossible. So the effort, it's lodged at the moment, and I think that's one of the beautiful things in Auroville. It's lodged within the individuals. The torch, the flame is not absent, it's there. But we just don't know how to extend that inner feeling of connectedness with our inner body and with the thing that we want to reach. How do we expand that on the outer? When we come together, and we have obviously to make decisions, we have to do that with the residents' assembly has the power to make decisions, and everything has to go through a residents' assembly. You can imagine, not everybody participates in the meeting, but 2,000, 1,500, 1,750 people was the maximum we ever reached to make a common decision. And that's where the effort, the inner effort, I think, is taking place. It's not on the surface, it's much more hidden, but that is why it's so difficult. And if you go back to your personal experience, your family, do you agree on everything? Do you agree within your community on everything? So you can see it's the same in Auroville. Disagreement, disputes, and it's that what is blocking us. And that's why it's such a lot. And it has to be done. It has to be done somewhere. And we hope that the effort of the continuous effort, not the stuttering, not we start, we stop, but a continuous effort of trying to reach that common ideal and being able to express it in a mature way, in an adult way, producing some wisdom, that will take quite a while. And it's there where one of the key elements which we are missing, almost the missing link in moving forward. And it has to be done somewhere on the planet in order to move forward. Because we believe, like the tale of the 100 monkey, which you sure I know, which you must know, that once there is a body which is not composed of just a few individuals, when it's more, when it has enough mass, it will reproduce itself. We are not yet there.
So you feel that in the sense of the original idea of a sustainable town, it was maybe you yourself when you envisaged it, and now there's still a gap and there's still a long way to go.
No, but that was part of the experiment. We are not giving the candy before we reach the shop.
Okay.
So part of the experiment was trying to make a living embodiment of a human unity. We are building on that one. We haven't failed, but definitely we have not reached the terminus. Far from it, far from it.
Okay. I would also like you to speak a little bit about the economy, or how actually Auroville works, because I think this is somewhat totally different from the way we live in the cities, or even in the villages. And especially now during the lockdown, we have realized so many things about our consumeristic lifestyle and things like that. And I mean, in Auroville, there is already a completely different system of ownership, of the way resources are shared, etc. Would you like to say a little bit about that? How does it work?
The- let's just emphasize the positive things, because the list of things which don't work, it's huge again. Um, the positive things is that we don't own the land. Nobody of us, we all live in houses. We don't own the houses. We don't own the land. Um, this is quite a forward step, I think. I do believe. We know that. Um, this is one thing. How we manage ourselves economically, it's a variety of small experiments taking place, some of them having a much longer lifetime because they cater to the needs of the groups who experiment with it. Quite a few fizzle out because they are not practical. And that continues. That's the good thing. It continues. We still continue with economical models of trying to share. We have good points. There is, Pavilion uses very frequently the Nandini shop, where you can actually bring used clothes that you don't need anymore. They repair them, they wash them, and the community members use them. It's very frequent. It's a much used shop for everything. So I think that's also a good, and there are plenty of little things which happen on the road. But speaking about a forward way, an example that would fit all of us, I don't think we have reached that. We have reached. We usually have a more simple life than in an urban setting, which is true. But we live quite comfortable. Things are taken care of, the basic things are taken care of, and we come to very interesting with the lockdown now and with a cutting of the financial inflow. We don't have guests, we don't have handicraft sales, we don't have work, the units, we don't have incoming jobs and things like that. So we're starting to feel the first wave of difficulties, and it will be interesting to see how, as a community, we take care of. We sit in the same situation as actually your part and in many parts of India. We will have to tackle that one. There are interesting experiments taking place. One of them is that we have our internal insurance program. There are many things like that which are working. I think, again, to bring that in example, in a moving pattern where everybody is taken care of, also the different lifestyles, the different needs, because you can only develop a community when you take care of the different lifestyle, different needs. If you suppress the needs, they come up in other ways. So somebody needs a car, somebody is happy with a cycle. How do you deal with that one? And these are ongoing, I give you just examples, these are ongoing issues which we're trying to solve, but we haven't solved. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
He has to agree.
There are huge gaps. We have the ideal, we have established more or less a cashless economy within Auroville, which works quite well. But some people asked us, what is the difference with the credit card and your card? It's the same. You still need money to go to a shop and to buy your products. So we continue with trying to experiment, but again, sorry, it's not the solution, or it's not something that would be an example which we could say, wow, there we have reached. Long way to go, another long way.
I request you, Tensi, to slightly come forward because we are losing your voice a little bit. I'm now going to move on to a lot of comments coming here on the chat. But here I'm going to talk about Ranjani.
Something to the younger generation.
Yeah. Ranjani Parshuraman has asked, great presentation, sir, as it was correctly specified that one needs to be responsible personally. Will it be a good idea to list down directives in a way people should respond to their respective location, example, clothing, which relates to the flow factor, so one doesn't portray formality, the method of disposal of waste at an individual, etc., etc. What do you think? And she also asked, there's another question. So she asks about, are there any sort of directives that should be there for people, or do you think that way? This is a question from architect Ranjani.
I start, and then the other two have to answer a little bit. We have the Charter of Auroville, which are 4 points, and which is the anchor, which is, would we call it a benchmark? Something like that, something that we have to try to reach. Extremely high, it will take us a long time to reach those things, but this is, and it has a place for everything. That's so fantastic. It's so concise, it's so wide, the charter in 4 points of Auroville. It touches all the aspects of what we have to do. You have to translate that into practical things, into governance, and then we use guidelines. And people often misinterpret guidelines with rules, because there is an automatic, it's almost like the Pavlov reaction, you know. You want to impose rules to others, but you don't apply to the rules. So we have that phenomenon also in Auroville. We have guidelines which are not fixed, and whenever they become obsolete, we change them.
That's good.
And these are given, for the rest, we are citizens of India, and we are absolutely, we have to conduct ourselves according to the laws of India, no doubt about it. But within the community, we have the freedom to experiment with improving our systems, governance system. Yeah.
Wow. So I think Ranjani, for you, Auroville Charter might be an interesting starting point to look at. But at the same time, what Tensi says is that rules are not, forever. They are flexible, and they change as per the individuals who are part of it. So that's a very important point. There is a question from architect Pratiksha Hurpade, and I think a few others have also asked similar questions. It's about the landscape of Auroville, and I think you could tell us a little bit about the kind of trees that are grown. There was earlier also a question from Beena Santosh, who talked about, are the trees or the plantation in Auroville, were they done along with the harvesting system? Are they suitable for it, or something like that? So could you tell us a little bit about the landscape in Auroville and the plantation?
Great. Trees.
I think in the very beginning, when the pioneers arrived here in Auroville, it was a very barren landscape. So there was a lot of trial and error. And the one tree which really flourished, funnily enough, was an imported tree from Australia, an acacia. Due to the harsh climate that we had over here, very barren, little water, lots of sun, the acacia somehow managed to survive, creating a kind of a shade, allowing other species under to grow. So, I mean, there's a whole list of trees you could mention and say that grow well over here, but amongst them, the most common are acacia, mahogany, another tree that comes from Africa, neem tree, which is an indigenous tree, teak, we also have a local teak, TDEF, tropical dry evergreen trees, which are the local ones, and many. Then we go on into a whole botanical list. But in my opinion, I mean, the main ones which really flourished over here, the two main ones would be acacia and mahogany. They really were the first ones that created a shade net, allowing the other ones to grow.
Thank you, Chaitanya. I think I just want to relate one part, when we used to come to Auroville, usually landing up late in the night, and we used to come in a bus, and the driver would say, this is a forest and nobody goes in over here. You've never been here. And for the students also, for the first time entering, and it's hard to imagine that this land was barren that many years ago. And it's a sort of proof that what people can do in a barren land and create a forest. So that's really amazing.
I think it's important to say that's one of the main success stories of Auroville, the regeneration of the forest. That without doubt is probably the biggest achievement we've gotten so far, despite all the political, economic, and so forth. If you look at that story, that's one to be proud of, which really works.
Yes. There's an interesting question from Dhara Purohit, architect Dhara Purohit. Hi, Dhara. She's asking, is there any specific spiritual practice that binds the community together?
If I can speak very briefly about it, I think it's the integral yoga, which is followed by many. I think you can look it up by Sri Aurobindo. It was there. You can study about that. And I would say that's it about the spiritual aspect of it. Maybe Tensi can elaborate more on that part.
There is no imposition of any practice within Auroville. You don't need to meditate. You don't need to shave your hair. You don't need to be brahmacharian. You don't need to eat only vegetarian food. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Unless it's the place where you embrace diversity in its full range, its full aspect. But there is always a but. It has to be harmoniously incorporated with all the rest. And that's where the effort and that's where the challenge is.
Great. Embracing diversity. I like that. There is a question from Sarang Yadwadkar, who's asking a very specific question related to energy. And that is also a question I wanted to ask you about energy and water. So he's asking, what is the source of energy at Auroville and how much fresh water is consumed per capita and per capita in Auroville? I mean, is Auroville off-grid in terms of energy and water, or is it still connected, or is it like independent? How is it partly, connected to the system?
We have a large pool of solar panels, which we are increasing almost monthly. We have the community, very interesting. We own 3 wind generators in the south, which supply more energy than we consume. So we are a net producing, a positive producing community. We export energy. um, we have a whole program in trying to become self-sufficient on the energy level. We are not yet there, but it's one also with a story which is not successful, but it's commendable. We're doing a commendable effort. We still are supplied, our main supply comes, of course, from the Tamil Nadu Electricity Board, but we replace the energy that we use, and by the wind generators in the south and by the solar panels installed. We have a program where every usable flat roof is installed with solar panels. We're busy with that one. Water or water source, or main water source, is from groundwater, and that's where we are concerned about, because the aquifers, despite all the efforts that we have done to do zero rainwater, what you say, runoff, afforestation, which Chaitanya spoke about, all these kind of interventions, which were ecological rehabilitation interventions, through the checking of these wells, we saw that we are not gaining. The water level is not replenishing, it's going down year after year. In some wells, very dramatically. So that's where the button, the urgent button, was pushed to try to see whether we could use other sources. And there is not one other source that we can use right away and plug as an alternative. And that's why we came up with the name multi-sourcing. We will have different sources, which we named rainwater, wastewater, groundwater, and then hopefully maybe desalinated. We will have to make a mix of them. It's actually something that they do very efficient in Israel, which you know, but on a much better way than we do. We just started. It's putting them together. Why would we use fresh water for agriculture if we can recycle the wastewater that we use? By the way, Aurovillian households use anything between 90 to 220 liters per person. 220 is because there are other uses. Average, we are on 150, between 130 and 150, which we reach the standard. I think that explains the question.
Yes, thank you, Tensi. So there is a question from Sunetra Toshniwal, and she asks about, can you throw more light on any new innovations, new research methodologies, any study on biomimicry, etc.? And I would like to just add to this question, because I think most of the people who visit Auroville have this, see a fascinating landscape with a lot of beauty and aesthetics and creativity. So maybe you can combine all of this. And is there any experiments in terms of biomimicry is one of the questions. And what drives the creativity that we see in Auroville?
That's something for Parneet. She's in the midst of that one. What drives creativity?
I think for me, what drives the creativity is the environment itself, and knowing the story of how it was. Maybe even for me, the biggest inspiration is the afforestation work that happened from the land which was once a forest, then cut barren by the colonizers, and then restored back into its greenery. And the people coming here with no expectations, but just trying to do that. So the stories are the biggest influencer in that sense. And when you are in that environment where there are people around doing creative things, itself, the environment drives you around. And yeah, for me, that's what it is. And there are people who have different philosophies, but that makes them, that's a diversity aspect of it. They believe in something, whether it is the green belters who are diehard just planters who don't believe in building the city, but then there are people who are really pushing the technologies and construction ahead. Auroville Earth Institute, I would say, is one of the achievements where they are UNESCO recognized and their standards are used all over the world. So in terms of technology, these are the ones, especially with the earth, I would say, and trying to really see what works in the climate, what works for the people, and what works in terms of the social structure. And in terms of biomimicry, I think there are experiments around, but nothing specific, I would say, to it. But you will see unusual structures here which will inspire you and intrigue you towards it itself. Yeah.
Thanks, Pavneet. I just want to answer also to Sunetra Toshniwal, in addition to what Pavneet said, that one of the amazing things about Auroville is being in nature, and that whole experience is totally different. You have much more energy, creativity. Everything is like a wonderful place to be, you know. And I think most of the students who came there also experienced the big difference as the silence that you feel as the sun sets and the night sets in. Almost the whole place becomes silent, which is so unusual for the city dwellers, and that is also sort of a very special part of Auroville. And you can see the night sky, and that's something that students used to write about, that we can see the night sky with so many stars, which is amazing. And I just want to add also that I was in February in Auroville for a workshop on 3D printing, where we actually were experimenting with the blocks which were 3D printed, earth blocks which were 3D printed. I think there's a lot of innovation even happening in that field. So yes, there's a lot happening in Auroville. And there's a question here from Bhavya Reddy. And I want to come back to you, Pavneet, on a different question, but there's a question here from Bhavya who asks about, may I know when will the coming workshops begin regarding hands-on experience in Auroville?
I think that depends on the coronavirus.
Okay.
As soon as it's over, I think, depending on the government relaxations and everything, we are waiting. We can say that.
So Pavneet, coming back to you, I just wanted to ask you, as your experience as an Aurovillian, what was the thing that brought you to Auroville, and what was your journey, sort of, in a very brief, about?
Okay, so I'm here almost 4 years now, and being an architect, I heard about this just when I graduated, and I came for the workshop with the Auroville Earth Institute on bioclimatic architecture. And I think once you are here, it's sort of a magnet for you that you want to come. That's how it happened for me, and I wanted to come back. And I met my husband here, so that's like another dimension. But what makes me stay here is a combination of, again, the environment, the people, and the life you can live. Yeah, and the chance of improving yourself every day to do something. Almost every day you can actually end up doing something new, which kind of is difficult in a city. One can say even in lockdown, we kept ourselves busy with planting, with different things, which we were lucky enough to be here and be able to do it. Yeah.
Thanks, Pavneet. So there's a question from Sarang Yadwadkar on what was the impact of Corona pandemic on Auroville?
Surprisingly, the number of cases over here has been really few, extremely few. That could be, I think 3 cases were there. The reason could be the density, which is quite high. And people were really, density is quite low, sorry. And people have immediately respected the guidelines. People were stepping out to help each other, volunteer. There were people who were helping out the elder ones who needed help. Immediately in the cooperative that we have, the produce distribution for groceries, there were people who volunteered themselves to facilitate everything. So the whole community kind of came together to deal with it together and help each other where people needed help. So I think we managed pretty well. We are still managing quite good. Yeah.
So unlike most places,
I would say, yes, I would say the system, the collective is pretty robust when people come together and help each other.
Resilient.
Yes, quite resilient, we can say that.
Okay. There's a question back to 10C on by Avinash Sabangini. What inspired you, sir, for the Auroville planning and sustainability practices?
What inspired me? It came along and I went with the surf, with the wave. I surfed on it, and inspiring, I'm not too sure. My role over the years has been more, it's been quite defined. I'm an initiator, and I manage 2 trusts, and I was put in that position. I didn't have a natural quality for that one, but I had no choice. At a certain point, you have to jump. I had an interest in these things, obviously, but there was no specific knowledge because I studied something completely different than ferrocement and wastewater. They were all kind of a passion which developed over several years, but I find myself in the role of looking out for new projects which could be implemented, which could be which could add something to the community. Usually there is a self-interest for the community, for Auroville. And if they come to maturity and they work, then we have another source of income because they go to the commercial side. So that's another thing. It means every time we go for a new product, you have to put a team together, and you know, it's a long road. I guess I'm not the only one. There are more examples around.
I think it has been a wonderful talk, and I'll be sending you a lot more messages which are here on the chat directly to you. They've all appreciated the work that is happening in Auroville, especially the simplicity of things. So that's really wonderful. And just as we close, Tensi, would you like to give any message to the people who are watching this webinar, to the students, to the participants? There are lots of people from academia, the students and architecture students, as well as architects. Is there any message that you would like to give in terms of sustainability or how your experience has been?
Yeah, my my connection with the work I do has helped me through the people that I encountered to grow. And I think that's a gift which is very precious, because I've come in contact with so many people and they all have contributed something. So thank you. All those students, all those resource persons who helped us in either small, direct or indirect way, have contributed ultimately to the growth and the blossoming of CSR, but also to the growth of the people who have been participating in that effort. So I would say thank you. And I hope that some of the ideals which are driving Auroville and which are actually universal qualities, truthfulness, dedication, self-improvement, trying for perfection, not leaving it, making a cupboard which closes properly. You cannot imagine how difficult it is. But if you give up in the middle, you live your life long with a cupboard who doesn't close properly. So these are small examples. Honesty, we mentioned that already. These are all universal qualities: sharing, compassion. All these things have an opportunity to be developed here, but they can also be developed in your work environment. They can also be developed in your family, in your wider circle. So I hope that these examples, that we increase the wider circle with this little model which is happening in South India. Many things are not working. You make a very rosy picture about Auroville, but there is also most of the things have a downside. So we're still struggling. The good thing is that most of the people I come across with, where I live with, where I work with, have that inner flame within them, and that makes it livable.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tensi. Thank you, Pavneet and Chaitanya, for your valuable time and the whole presentation and taking us to this wonderful tour of Auroville. I'm sure that a lot of people are inspired by this, as I can see from the chat. And it's a wonderful experience in sustainability, and for a great example in India. I mean, people all over the world come to just visit Auroville and find out what's been done here. So great effort. Thank you. And thank you for continuing to inspire us. I will hand over to Sneha now to take it further. Sneha?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Hi. Thank you, Tensi, so much. Thank you, Chaitanya and Pavni. So hope to see you very soon. And soon we will see you for our next webinar very soon. So people tune into our Instagram and Facebook page for further updates. The link to join our pages have been posted in the chat window. Also subscribe to our YouTube page and do check our past webinars. Thank you for joining us. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. See
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.